want to welcome all of you to True Light Community Church's Wednesday reflection on the Word. We continue to discuss the miracles of Jesus, and today we're going to come to a story that is perhaps not as familiar to many of us, which is Jesus feeding 4,000 people. Now, you might be saying, wait. I know Jesus feeding 5,000, but what is up with this 4,000? Are these two separate stories? Some biblical scholars says no, actually, they're one event that is um, put into a certain gospel twice for a different reasons, and some people says no, actually, they're two separate events. Now, I tend to believe they're two separate events, as Jesus actually do mention these two events later on. But we're gonna read this particular incident. This is only mentioned in Matthew and Mark, unlike Jesus feeding 5,000, which is mentioned in all four of the Gospel. Let me read to us Mark chapter 8, verses 1 through 10. In those days, when again a great crowd had gathered, and they had nothing to eat, he called his disciples to him and said to them, I have compassion on the crowd because they have been with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away hungry to their homes, they will faint on the way. And some of them have come from far away. And his disciples answered him, How can one feed these people with bread here in this desolate place? And he asked them, How many loaves do you have? They say, 7. And he directed the crowd to sit down on the ground, and he took 7 loaves, and having given thanks, he broke them and gave them to his disciples to set before the people. And they set them before the crowd. And they had a few small fish, and having blessed them, he said that these also should be set before them. And when they ate and were satisfied, and they took up the broken pieces left over, 7 baskets full. And there were about 4,000 people, and he sent them away. And immediately he got into the boat with his disciples and went to the district of Darmanuta. The word of the Lord for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Now, we see some similarities, right, between these two events. One, Jesus takes a small number of bread and fish and feeds multitude, 4,000, 5,000. Now, both of them were just men, so the both crowd can easily topple 10,000 people. That Jesus would feed these many people with just few loaves of bread and few fish. And there's other similarities that he always prayed before feeding. Disciples were used to set these meals before the people. And after people were satisfied, they didn't just have a bite. They were full. They were satisfied. They were leftovers. Right? They were leftovers. And then after the whole thing, Jesus and his disciples gets into a boat and goes to a different place. Now, some differences. Obviously, the total number of people. And the amount of bread and fish that were used. Now, some people say because of this, the miracle of feeding 5,000 is a greater miracle because, Jesus starts out with a smaller number of loaves. 5,000 with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. 4,000 with 7 loaves of bread and few fish. We don't know exactly how many, right? So there's that difference. And then there's difference in number of leftover baskets. In the feeding of 5,000, you have 12 baskets left over. In this particular incident, the feeding of the 4,000, you have 7 baskets left over. And Jesus prayed once, at least the way the disciples wrote it, both for the bread and the fish in the feeding of the 5,000, but he prays twice in this particular incident. Right? So there's a lot of similarities, but there are some differences, especially when it comes to the details. Now, why? Why then these two stories? Why then these two stories? Right? If you believe that these were actually two separate events, as I do, there's a reason, there's a very good probable reason why this miracle happened twice. Why Jesus would actually perform this miracle again. And that is, in one incident, the miracle, the crowd was mainly Jews. They were Jewish followers of Jesus. And in this miracle, the feeding of the 4,000, the crowd was perhaps mainly Gentiles. When you look at the context, Jesus was actually in the Gentile region in this particular time. Now, we also get a clue from different details. One, the numbers that were used: 5 loaves of bread, 5,000 people. Right? That symbolizes the Pentateuch, the Torah, the law of Moses, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, and then 12 baskets left over, symbolizing 12 tribes of Israel. With the feeding of the 4,000, you get number 4, which represents the 4 corners of the world, and then you also get number 7 baskets left over, which equates to 7, and from there you get 70, which is the number of nations. So really talking about the whole world. So you see how it fits into the Jewish versus Gentile event here, right? And there's this thing, the term that's used for basket, right? For the feeding of the 5,000, the term that was used for basket actually had to do with basket they would use for eating in the Jewish context. And it was perhaps a smaller basket. In this incident, the 7 baskets, it was a much larger basket. It was large enough for people to, actually a person to climb into and be lured out of the city, as we see later on Paul doing. So it's a Jews versus Gentile thing. And here's where I'm getting at. The reason that Jesus actually performs this miracle again, the feeding of the multitude. I mean, this is not the only miracle that Jesus performed more than once. Jesus healed sick many, many, many times. But the reason that this is being performed again, and the reason that the gospel writers actually would write, especially Matthew and Mark would actually write this account as well, is to show us the fact that Jesus is one who will feed not just the Jews, not just the Gentile, but all of the world. This miracle really goes on to show God's love and grace. Because in both instances, look at where people are. People are out in the desert, in a lonely place, in a desolate place. And yet, God feeds them. God fills them up. God is faithful. Jesus is merciful. Jesus had compassion on these people. And dear friends, that's who our God is. This miracle of feeding 4,000 is just another reminder that we serve a compassionate God who looks upon our needs and is able to fill us up. Do you know that love of God? Have you ever tasted that? I heard this phrase, testimony. When people give testimony. And I heard it being described this way. The reason that people give testimony is not to just show what God has done, but it's actually to say to God, do it again. Do it again. And Jesus has done it again. And he has ultimately done it on the cross. May this miracle be a reminder of this amazing love, grace, and faithfulness of our God.